Cascadia is roughly a geographic area in northwest of North America. It's bounded to the west just for you. It's bounded to the west by the Pacific Ocean and on the east by the Rocky Mountains. And then it stretches north-south from sort of just north of California up into Canada a little bit. It is a puzzly tile laying and token drafting game, which will make more sense when I talk about the rules. Greetings, I'm Dr. Ransom Poythress, biology professor at Houghton University, and I'm here with Nathaniel, as always, to talk to you today about this board game, Cascadia, designed by Randy Flynn with art by Beth Sobel and published by Flat Out Games. Cascadia is a 1 to 4 player game that was published in 2021 and became very, very popular, partly because of the simple gameplay. So let's talk a little bit about how it's played, and then we'll talk about the science. So I think one of the appeals for Cascadia, which I have currently here set up as a 2-player game, is the incredible simplicity of gameplay. So on your turn, you do 2 things. You take one collection of these 4 tiles up here, this one, this habitat tile, and this animal tile, or this one, or this one, or this one. The second thing you do is you place them into your growing kind of habitat or terrain here. So in this case, if I were to place this tile, I can place it anywhere I want, as long as it is adjacent to an existing tile here. So I can place it right there. And then I have to place my animal tile on an animal tile here that it matches it and is empty. So there's an eagle here and there's an eagle here, so I could place it in either one of those. If I place it here, you'll notice that this particular tile only has one animal, it's the eagle, on it. So when I do that, I actually gain one of these tokens, which can be helpful later on and gives me some points later on in the game. Most of the tokens that are going to be available have multiple different options for you in terms of placing. And that's it. That's the entire gameplay. You do that 20 times and you've created a habitat. And then once you've taken one, you refill that spot. You draw a new animal from this handy dandy little bag over here. And then the other person goes and they would take some pairing and place it into their growing habitat. And you just kind of keep doing that until the end of the game. And at the end of the game, you do the scoring. So you'll notice that there are 5 cards down here. Each of these has a different scoring condition for the 5 different types of animals here, for the fox, the elk, the salmon, the bear, and the hawk. There are multiple different versions of these cards. There's a couple more versions in the box, so there's different scoring conditions for some of these if you want. And so you'll add up your points based on where things are placed. So for example, salmon in this case do best when they're in what's called a run. So that means that they are connected to each other in a line. Get more points that way. And so there's just varying different kinds of scoring things. You also get habitat scoring. So you'll notice here I have 3 different tiles with this particular light green habitat here. And so if I have more of this, my largest area of this is larger than his largest area of this, sorry Nathaniel, then I score the points for that particular habitat type. But you'll notice that he has 3 of this water type here, and I only have a habitat of 2 of that type. So he would score the points for having the largest habitat of that type. And so the scoring and how the scoring works is sort of where the strategicness, the strategizing, some version of the word strategy involves here. You're scoring based on habitat and the placement rules for the animals. That's how the game is played. Pretty simple. So let's talk a little bit about the science and some of the reality of this situation. So there's a couple of common threads with some of the games that we're talking about. A lot of them tend to be either they start with the theme, they start with some kind of sciencey thing that they want to do, or they start with what's called the mechanic, which is the way a game is played, and then they add the science theme on afterwards. This one definitely falls into the latter category. In fact, in interviews, Randy Flynn has talked about the fact that he started with this idea of a double tile laying as his initial concept. So that's the idea of taking the hexagonal pieces and then putting another piece on top of them. So that was where he started and kind of then went and developed from there. And in fact, the early versions of this game had nothing to do with with this Cascadia stuff or anything like that. It was called Lands and Creatures, and it just had all kinds of animals all over the place. There's a kind of helpful thing in the book at the very back here where they talk about the different kinds of animals and habitats and give a little bit description about each of them in terms of the reality and the science behind that. But in terms of gameplay, because it started as a mechanic first, the gameplay doesn't really have anything to do with the particular animals, and you could probably remove the entire all the animals and the habitats and just do it based on points, and it would still sort of play the same. They've incorporated a couple of things. So hawks, for example, a lot of their point scoring capabilities tend to be based on being separated from other hawks, which is sort of true. The hawks do tend to be a bit more solitary in their kinds of things. But some of these other kinds of things, like grizzly bears, can both be solitary, but they also have small family units. And then the same with foxes as well. They tend to be social and work in family units, but then forage alone. The salmon scoring in something is called a salmon run, which is a series of connected salmon pieces across, is a reference to something that happens every year in the Pacific Northwest, which is when salmon go on runs, which is essentially salmon returning to their home site, returning to a spawning site where they actually travel upriver, sometimes more than over 100 miles. They're actually traveling upriver. So obviously, in order to be on a river, you have to there's a connectedness to that. Elk, for example, they can congregate in really large herds of over 100 elk at times. It's a light connection, I would say, but this is primarily not driven by the science. The aesthetics and the appeal are easy and clean and simple, and there's just enough strategic difference in terms of what tiles you're picking and where you're playing them, that it's still quite appealing and visually pleasing, at least. So even though the science is light, I think this is still a fun game to enjoy, and it's easy to pick up and play. So anyway, that's Cascadia, and hopefully you'll join me for the next one soon.